Joel, welcome to the Invisible Path, man.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Here we are.
So before I forget to do this, I mentioned this on the last podcast, but I want to just take a moment to appreciate the fact that we have had a significant uptick in international listenership, specifically in the United Kingdom, Italy, France, Serbia, and Australia. So if I knew how to say hello in any of those languages, I would.
That's amazing. They get to witness whatever our silly American perspective, or at least mine is silly and filled with ignorance. So welcome and apologies, right?
Welcome and apologies is that'd be a great podcast. Welcome and apologies, a great podcast title,
right? And especially since we're all like in different sort of bubbles, like reality bubbles out there, and depending on what you're consuming and how plugged in you are. And recently I got this is related, great tangent here. All apologies. Recently I really concretized my paranoia by getting a VPN service. And what's fascinating about this is then you can get, depending on where you select your server to be from, you get commercials from that country. And this is a fascinating thing to do, because then you see, messaging from different places. And a lot of it is sort of, I guess, maybe westernized or internetized, and so in a lot of ways it's very similar, but there are differences. And it's like, yes, it's a good reminder of like, okay, I'm in this particular reality bubble. So
I have that a similar experience with a VPN in just like homepage presentation, right? Because the news information that they plug into you, and sometimes I forget the VPN's on, and I'm getting all of these very localized stories from Missouri or whatever popping at me. And it is very interesting to just see, even within the confines of the United States, where what is being pushed at people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great. You're getting more listenership. That's awesome.
Different countries. Good.
So cool.
It's always good. International is not something. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to think that there is international reach right out of the confines of our own home.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll jump right in on a very Americanized question to start off. Comes from Dale, and it's coming right after me, which I really appreciate. It says, Dale. No. It's from Dale, and it says, Patrick, you made a comment. It says, Patrick, you made a comment about AOC attending the Met Gala not being a big deal because she wasn't wearing a quote-unquote tuxedo like the rest of them. How on earth do you justify that stance? And I think that I remember making that comment. I don't remember exactly the context that it was made in, but I think it's a valid question. My point would be making a Banksy level artistic statement in a worldwide media opportunity is remarkably different than blending in with the event. So to kind of refresh the idea here, AOC wore a gown, a dress to the Met Gala, which is, I don't really know what the Met Gala is, but it's a gathering of wealthy people, from my understanding. And she wore a thing that said tax the rich on the back of it. And it got worldwide media coverage, right? And a lot of people said it was hypocritical. And my response was, it's not hypocritical at all. It is literally using one of the largest platforms you could possibly have to make a statement about something you believe in. And I think that's remarkably different than attending the event in a dress where you wouldn't have gotten coverage. If you did get coverage, it would have been inside the confines of DC, and no one would have ever spoken about it at all. So that's how I justify that stance.
So what's the questioner's position here? That it was more important, or it was less important?
So they were questioning me on why I said it wasn't a big deal that she was there. And I don't remember exactly what it was.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Or it could have been me playing devil's advocate there as well, because if you want to look at it a different way, you could say, well, just the fact that it was covered by everybody means that it's covered by all the mainstream outlets, means that it's a socially acceptable piece of messaging. And that if you want to be really cynical about it, you would say, well, these people all know actually that you actually can't tax the wealthy, right? Because historically speaking, the tax rate is always about the same. It really doesn't matter. Like the amount of taxes that the country pulls in as a percentage of gross domestic product apparently does not have a whole lot of variance to it. And so even though it sounds very nice and it's something people can understand, you could just say, you could either say one of two things. You could say, well, AOC is naive because she doesn't understand history. Or you could say, well, she's a maverick because she's going to figure out something new. That's a potential. Or you could say she's just pandering to her base. And so these are all very cynical ways to look at it, or ways that have to do with just like what has occurred historically. And I don't even have an opinion. Like, I think it is interesting how she's on Twitch. She's doing a great job getting an audience. And I think overall it will probably be a benefit. And if you just use the, crotchety old man Scrooge McDuck argument I used about how it doesn't matter how much you try to tax the wealthy, it's sort of like giving up and saying, well, you can't do anything about it. So I have no solutions, just rambling at this point. But it is interesting to at least hear the critiques of people that like know this history of tax collection and say, well, will it work or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then
so I know
matter?
You've said that. Yeah. I know you've said that. I think if we look at American history, there's a significant difference between tax collection in the 1920s, in the roaring 20s. And then there's a precipitous drop off, partly related to the fact that we go into the Depression and economic policies just have to change. And then there is a precipitous increase on taxing of the wealthy that really leads the exodus of the Depression until we hit the 80s, and Reaganomics platform significantly decreases the tax load upon the wealthy once again. So I mean, if I look at American history in the last 100 years, I think there are some pretty clear points of taxes upon the wealthy impacting a relationship to the gross domestic product. I don't know that those two things are necessarily marketably that important, especially in today's age where so much of American economic accumulation is done outside of the United States. So I don't know that is marketably that important anymore specifically, but I do find the unwillingness to tax billionaires remarkably baffling to me. Jeff Bezos paying taxes on $81,000 in 2020 is effing wrong, right? I don't have any other way to respond to that than that is effing wrong. And their response seems to be, hey, we're getting paid in stocks and the potential of stocks going down is a risk. And okay, then let's not do stock options anymore. Like, let's take that away. And I guarantee you your response will not be, oh, that's fine. You will say, no, I want to get paid in stocks. So if you're recognizing that it is a benefit for you, then let's pay taxes on it. I don't understand the fight against that, but I know almost every single person I talk to will fight me on that. So something within my thinking does not line up with the way other people are thinking, for sure.
It's good to be a heretic. I think we both are in different ways.
For sure.
I mean, another real terrifying way to look at it is if you just say, okay, well, let's just say you took all of the money from all of the billionaires in the country. Let's just say you took 100% of their money. Well, how long would that actually finance the government spending, or what kind of impact would that actually have on, trying to pay down the 30 trillion in national debt? And it would just
Are we willing to cut the military budget?
Right? No, oh God, no, right? So part of it is just the way I see it is like, well, Americans are incredibly gullible every 2 years and every 4 years. With every election, we're incredibly gullible. We say, well, these new people are going to fix the problems. And I don't know if it's going to happen or not. And it does get back. And let's hope something does get better. It seems like there's a huge battle, generational battle, and a battle of different ideologies happening right now. And let's hope it all plays out well. But certainly, I think both you and I recognize that if you want things to improve for you personally, you shouldn't rely on elected officials to do that.
I would agree with that.
So much of politics and what they're doing there, it's all about the connections, right? And I think, I've said it before many times, like if I had those connections and if I was in that position of power, I don't think I'd necessarily be a good person. I'm sure I'd be seduced by all sorts of stuff, and put myself and my family and my friends first above people that I, supposedly represented. And maybe that just makes me a terrible person. Maybe it makes me a realist. I don't know, but no one's going to come save you in 2021 or 2022.
Okay, so I'm really excited on a lot of things. I also think that you're right on that. Like, if we took away billionaires' money, it's not going to solve a $1 trillion problem. But I think the problem that we could solve is the inequity in human existence. And it's a problem that we talked about in the last episode, which is people are dropping out of society because their lives are so terrible within society that a life outside of society is better for them. There is a logical choice to drop out of society. And that's the problem that I think we should be looking at. Will it solve all problems? No. But if we are creating jobs that are creating lives that are so terrible that jobs are not worth doing, we don't have a functioning economy. And I think that's a really important thing, is we're building up all of these billionaires based upon the backs of people who are doing jobs that they are deciding are not worth it. $25 an hour is not enough anymore. That's the reality. And is that messed up? Sure. Like $25 an hour sounds like a lot. But if you try to live the average American lifestyle on $52,000 a year, you're gonna find out it's an impossibility. And $52,000 sounds like a lot, but doesn't go very far. I bet you a lot of people listening to this podcast spend more than half of that on food in a year. Way more than half of that on food in a year.
People in general, and I think that central banks and governments count on this. People do not understand what inflation or currency devaluation actually is. People say, oh, well, my home went up in value, but things are getting more expensive at the grocery store. It's like, well, that is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that the value of the dollars is going down, and they bled out. The value of dollars has bled out historically, and I think we're at like 3 cents of worth of value of what a dollar originally used to be. I mean, it's a slow process, and It's like, well, but the stock market's going up, so the economy's fine, whatever. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. No one's gonna save you. You've got to figure it out for yourself. And what I see coming up in the future is just a continued transfer of wealth from the have-nots to the haves. The dollar store is now the $1.25 store, right? That was an interesting thing that happened recently, where I think it was like the Dollar Tree decided that they're going to have to raise their base price for everything to $1.25.
Okay.
So, and that's going to disproportionately affect college kids and then lower income people.
Right.
That's what I see. I go to the Dollar Tree. It's great. You can get some awesome candles and stuff there. The kids love it. Go get some toys. Now it's $1.25. So it's a great teaching lesson for the teaching moment for the kids as well. It's like, well, here you go. Here's a real life inflation lesson. So, but
also a branding lesson. Also a branding lesson. Don't name your company after a price point, because it may be obsolete quicker than you imagine.
Tragic. Yeah.
Okay, so this question, I wish this wasn't the question, but Tommy Pickles is back, and awesome. It's not going to end this conversation. Tommy Pickles says, and by the way, Earthworm Jim, your anonymity is safe with me, but I have never received more questions about who someone is than who is Earthworm Jim. So Dang. You made an impact. Tommy Pickles says, guys, how much time does our society have left?
It's hard. I mean, it depends on what you mean by society, and it depends on what you mean by our society. Are we talking about just like I mean, again, are we talking about the American empire, because we're both in America? Are we talking about global society? I mean, when America has a recession or a depression, it's a real catastrophe for a lot of other countries. Here people can complain and they lose their jobs, but people in other countries can starve as a consequence of what's happening here. So that is just tragic. I don't know. You need a strong community for things to move forward. That's for sure. How long do we have? It's hard to know. It is really hard to know. There's so many people out there just spreading the doom, right? For much longer than you would assume. So the wealthy can continue to get wealthier. Everybody else can get ground down lower for quite a long time. And then it can snap all at once, but you just don't know when you're going to have that exponential decay round off and just head straight down. It's dangerous to predict things. Well, what do you think? How long do we have?
I don't know. I always think things are going to happen quicker than they do. So, I spend a lot of time thinking about that problem, or a similar problem anyway. But I mean, I think we've been talking about the same issues for a very long time. I also think that the charge within society is pretty high, and the higher the kinetic energy is, the more opportunity there is for an explosive change. So will that come? It's a real fascinating question, right? Because if you truly believe this change is going to happen within one lifetime, then there's a logical path to making very different choices with how you live your life. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. There's some really good stuff getting put out by the large money management groups. Goldman Sachs has really been on top of this. They actually published a really good white paper on the millions of people choosing to drop out of society, which came out significantly after our podcast. So we beat them to the punch on that. Access to information before Goldman Sachs has it. How nice is that, guys? But they're putting out a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, I think the money managers, they certainly have access to the data, and we don't. So we have to kind of look around and make some observational adjustments, and they can look at the actual numbers and see what's coming on that front. But I don't think anyone can predict what happens when someone straps dynamite to their body and blows themselves up inside of the football stadium, or whatever the terrorist event is going to be that is coming next, and how that changes things.
You know, back to the timing question, we've talked about the fourth turning before, and I buy into that. And these are 20-year cycles. We're in a crisis phase right now. And the crisis phase, this most recent one, started in 2008. And so we've got a 20-year period here. This thing is going to wrap up, you know, in whatever it is, 5 years, 6 years, 4 years, 7 years, who knows? Call it 5 years. Things could be significantly worse in a year or two. And maybe we're coming out of it, 7 years down the road, 6 years down the road, who the heck knows? Things are so incredibly unpredictable. It is just fascinating. There are a lot of reasons to be optimistic, I think, as well, but we've all got to prepare. So
we're all coming to you, Joel, for the optimistic look.
Yeah, that would be a mistake.
Okay, so to jump back in, and a little reminder on kind of where we left off in the idea of community. Did we wrap that up? Do you feel like we've wrapped that question up?
Sure.
Okay. So we are speaking.
I'm sure the questioner doesn't, but yeah, apologies.
June 17th, 2027. That's how much time we have left. Whatever's left between then and now. So hopefully nothing happens on June 17th, 2027. Hopefully it's a beautiful day. So we left things off. We kind of were speaking about community homes and the experience of kind of end of life care, and how that concept may fit in to community building in general. Before we get into that, I have an interesting question for you, Joel, directly from my brain. This is a question I asked on social media, so I have a pretty good amount of data on how people think about this question. And I specifically did not put out the results because I wanted to speak with you first. So the question is, if money didn't matter and you had a desire to change the world, would you rather have 100 employees or 100 volunteers? And I'll give you a little bit of time to think.
Volunteers, clearly.
Okay. So see, my answer is I have no idea. I think the complexity is really remarkable of this question. But I will say 90% of all people answered, 90+% of people who answered this question said volunteers.
So when you say if money doesn't matter, do you mean if money doesn't matter to anybody? Or,
sure.
Okay, yeah.
Money is equivalent across the equation. So the equation is not impacted by a financial requirement or restriction or benefit.
Then that means that you have no motivation there. So you're going to have to find, ideally, if people are willing to volunteer, then they are aligned with your mission and your vision. And so there's an intrinsic sort of motivation there.
Which is the general consensus, because I followed that up with a why question. That is the general consensus. I think this should play the devil's advocate portion. If you are working with volunteers, even if they have aligned ideologies, they may not be the most skilled in the things that you need to do, right? Like, say the way you're going to change the world is through some type of computer generated engineering. And you get a bunch of people they're really passionate about your project, but they've never touched a computer before. You may be at a pretty significant deficit in talent, and it may take a significant more amount of energy invested to get people up to speed. Where if you had the opportunity to hire people, you could hire people with higher skill sets, or potentially hire people with higher skill sets. But what I actually found this fascinating in reading the responses and reading the answers, that I just thought the question was interesting. That was it. I just thought the question was interesting. I didn't know what answer I would give, and I thought it would be interesting to find what other people answered. But as I started to think more about the question, I realized that this is the question. We could change very, very few words in this and make this a question of, would you rather live in socialism or capitalism? It's the same question. It's just phrased differently. And it is a microcosm of that experience. Yet if we ask that question, would you rather live in socialism or capitalism? The answers would be exactly reversed.
I mean, yeah, the free market is going to do a better job of you finding the talent you need for your mission.
Maybe.
Because people are self-interested and greedy if you have that money component there. Right?
Yeah. Maybe. But ideally, I think the reality is we want to say, oh, money is the thing. But look, both communism, socialism is, it's very important difference, right? Socialism and communism works the same way. Communism, socialism, capitalism, the three different modes of economic. In their purest essence, they all offer opportunity. I think it's pretty easy to make an argument that in the purest essence, communism is actually the most beautiful form of an economy, because it is quite literally an entire society of people working for the benefit of all. The problem is that never happens because people are selfish a-holes. So I think if you take out the human component, it's very, very easy, right, to make communism the most idealistic platform for societal build. So scary to the American government that you could get arrested for saying that in our past, right? You could be thrown in jail for saying communism was a valuable form. And it's the challenge is people get in the way because people do not all work for the good. And I think that's going to come back. But let me just turn that back over to you, because I've taken that idea, which I gave you 10 seconds to think about, and then I flipped the entire thing and I spent a week thinking about that.
Well, I mean, I favor the individual over the group, I guess. Back to the money question, you can look at Venezuela, and I heard something about how doctors there are prohibited from putting cause of death as malnourishment on death forms, autopsy forms, whatever. And this is an incredibly wealthy country because they have ungodly amounts of oil reserves, and yet they've completely destroyed their country and their currency. But
they don't have a functioning democracy, right? Like there's zero doubt they do not have a functioning democracy.
Correct. Yeah. I have this it's a 5 bolivar silver coin, and it's about the size of a old silver dollar from the US. So it costs you it has maybe about, call it $20 worth of silver in it. And it'll cost you, and it's a 5 bolivar coin. And if you want to buy one of those, a paper bolivar, Last time I checked, it was 75 million paper bolivar to buy that because they wrecked their currency through greed and mismanagement. And it gets back to just like that, those two faces of humanity, Cain and Abel, and how you can't set up some pure idealized society, because you can be sure that the people at the top that are controlling things are going to be just like everybody else. They're not going to be saints. They're going to have some kind of monstrous impulses within them. And that is why the least worst system it seems like we have is just letting everybody do what it is they want to do, and let the free market determine the value of things and determine what is important and what is not important. But that's going to continue to get distorted as things get worse in different countries. So if the price of food goes up too high, then you're going to have price controls, and there's going to be unintended consequences of that as well, with the supply chain. And it is just so nuanced and so complex that the best way, it seems like, to deal with this is just to let it happen without any sort of top-down control. But maybe obviously you need some kind of top-down control.
So I think that's the interesting thing, right?
Right. There's that nuance there, right? It can't be purely just let it all ride. It seems like there's a problem with that too.
I mean, we definitely have the 12 people overlord, right? There are 12 families that have more money than the rest of society. That is not that different than having a dictatorship control. Like, money is the thing that changes things in this country. We've set that up, but we've created the same problem, right? Maybe it took us a little longer to get there, but the problem is almost identical, in that we have people with too much power now. So I find this really fascinating. And I think it leads me into this idea that doesn't work for one reason, and it is because we are selfish. We have created this, as you said, you prioritize the individual over the group in a way that is detrimental to everyone. It's not just detrimental to the other people, it's detrimental to you too. So let me give you this idea. Because this is how I think we change and rebuild community within the lives we're living. So let's say you live on a cul-de-sac and it has, let's just use 10 houses, right? Because it makes the math easy. And each one of these houses was $300,000. And let's do 11 houses because it makes the math better. And so there's 11 houses on a cul-de-sac, and you want to make your lives better. What if 10 families got together and bought the 11th house? And they did that for one specific reason, so that house would be a communal space for meals, so that you had an entire house where you just offered meals to a cul-de-sac of 10 families. You split the cost of $300,000, so we had $30,000 each. We add that to the mortgage. $30,000 added onto your mortgage is going to be a percentage of payment that you are not going to notice. You never have a messy kitchen. You cook. Your family prepares a meal once every 10 days. And you share this responsibility of taking care of your community through food. And I think it's one of the easiest things we could do to rebuild community right now today without actually changing our lives, except that we'd have more time, right? 9 days out of every 10, you would not have the time you spend on creating and cleaning food, which, if you look at the amount of time you spend in your home creating and cleaning food is a significant portion of what you are doing. Your free time is essentially going to creating and cleaning food. It's why fast food companies exist. They don't make good food. They make easy food. They make garbage food that's super easy.
So delicious. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, have you seen what those mad scientists are doing with the food? It's crazy. Yeah, that's a fascinating thing. I mean, your point about how we're naturally selfish. I mean, the thing is and you're going to swindle people. Well,
Joel,
rip them
we
off.
broke up a bit. Will you start that over? Because I think this is important and I don't want to miss it.
Yeah. So selfishness, I think, if viewed properly, is a virtue in a way, because it's all about the time scale of that. And so you're going to start a business and you're just going to rip people off, that's not going to work out for you very well for very long. You might make some money at first, but that's going to eventually crumble around you. And so for you to actually be selfish and be greedy, you really have to find a way to genuinely help people out. It seems like, or at least this is like the pure capitalist argument, right? That you have to figure out a way to benefit people and give them real value in the short, medium, and long term, or else your greed is not going to work out well for you. And you won't be able to get as much money as you want. You can look at greedy Jeff Bezos, the perfect example of that. Like, you get your Amazon box on your door like that. He's creating tons of millionaires who are running their businesses off of his website and off of his platform. So he's done
you'd be
something.
Surprised on that number. I don't think he's creating tons of millionaires.
There's a lot of companies, though, I think, that are making money, and there's
a lot of companies making money. But guess who's making the majority of the money? The other thing so I think
it is consolidating.
Is the perfect guy, because if you remember early Amazon shopping, it took 3 days for you to get the thing, but the price was always the cheapest. And do you know why the price was the cheapest? Because they were developing a habit that you would shop on Amazon. And now the price is not the cheapest. And when Amazon was doing that, and to this day, Amazon does not make money off of their online selling, right? But they've put thousands of businesses out of business because they sold things for less than it cost to make them, so that they could develop a habit within you to shop on Amazon. And then once those businesses go away, they can raise the price. So I think Jeff Bezos is the perfect example. And I don't think greed is is a virtue. I think greed is a problem within the human being that creates problems within the human being's lives. You can look at Amazon as an opportunity, and it is for some people, but it is also a potentially remarkably destructive force on our society.
And what's interesting about it is it seems like an inevitability. If it wasn't him, it would be someone else. And it's following along that natural progression of the downtown getting gutted out by the mall, and then the Walmart killing the mall and the downtown, just really stomping that downtown to death. And then Amazon coming in and trying to kill Walmart. And so it's this inevitable thing.
Inevitable if we allow it.
Brought about by like the technology that we keep on. We're so fascinated with like all this technology development, and there's so many unintended but inevitable consequences of that, it seems like. And so
if we allow it. So China, remarkably technologically advanced, right?
Yeah.
They have downtowns, right? They have in-person shopping. They have markets. They have all these things. And they control the way technology works in their country. Now, is China the optimal place to use as an example? Absolutely not. But I think the reality is, if we pretend like we have to throw our hands up and be like, well, whatever the fuck happens, happens, that's also not true. Like, we can do that, but we will end up with one person with all the money. If all of our retail is done in one place, one guy is going to have all the money.
Well, that's what just continues to happen. Further consolidation, right? As
we allow it to happen.
Yeah. It's like some of it you could see coming. You could see it coming from a mile away, but some of it is just like, most of us, myself included, just you can't predict what's going to happen with all this technology development.
So are you familiar with the question of the commons?
No.
The question of the commons is essentially a study of how humans respond when faced with shared resources. And it's like, it is the most predictable thing ever. And I will go back to the China thing because I think it's really important, right? There's a bunch of criticism being lobbied at companies, and I don't know the details. There's something around like the NBA wouldn't allow players to speak out about some of the like enslavement camps within China. And there's a bunch of other companies that are like, I think Disney had one of their like movie stars issue some apology to China. And all of these things are happening so that these companies can do business in China. Now, the reality is, the reason these companies are willing to do business with these Chinese rules is because if they don't, someone else will. And someone else will reap the reward of their decision to be good, moralistic businesses. So the problem that we've created is not unfathomable, and we can't figure out. If there is not an incentive to be good, moralistic business practitioners, then you are penalized for being a good, moralistic business practitioner. It's very like when we actually look at the universal ways in which we solve these problems, understanding human psychology is the answer to all this, and it's very predictable. So like the way that I studied this was it was indigenous fishing populations who had these specific lakes, and they would essentially run these lakes out of fish. And then they would starve to death because they had captured every fish possible in a moment when they didn't need fish. They had so much fish, they were like throwing the fish underneath their house and just letting it rot. But if they didn't capture the fish that day, their neighbor would, and their neighbor would let the fish rot under their house. So everyone had the same mentality of, we need to capture as much fish as we can today, because if I don't, my neighbor will, and there will not be fish tomorrow. And until you realize that that is the natural mode of human, that if we are put in a place where if we don't have a benefit for being conservatory, we will not be conservatory. So how do we rethink society in a way where we understand that it's not just throw the chips up and see where they fall? It is, okay, how do we incentivize good decision-making? How do we incentivize good care and practice for the people who work for you? How do we incentivize the things that actually make society better instead of incentivizing the things that make money? Because money doesn't make society better. It's just stuff that we trade for stuff. So until we incentivize things that make society better, we will continually fall in these same problems. But it's not impossible to do. It's remarkably easy to do. Like, you and I could sit down in 6 hours, we could come up with 60-page document incentivizing businesses to do good things for society. It's just we couldn't get them through because no one has a reason. And until we can make that a universal thing, no one has the reason to do it.
Very good points. The maybe Bezos heard you because your connection was breaking up a ton, so I didn't hear a lot of your examples. He's pulling the strings. So yeah, gosh, I don't even know what to think. Like, it's hard to. The problem is like, well, who's going to be the person who's going to be the top-down person creating these incentives?
No one.
And they often have like unintended consequences, right? So that's the problem with all this stuff, right? It's like
everything has unintended consequences, right? Like, I think that we have gotten to this point in society where we're so scared to just stand up and say, yeah, there's a fucking problem right now. Because I honestly don't understand why. I don't understand why. But I know that I am in the minority. But I think we've gotten to this point where we're just like, yo, I don't want to pay taxes. So I don't want rich people to pay taxes. Because if rich people are paying taxes, that means I'm paying taxes. Newsflash, you're going to pay taxes. Whether rich people are paying taxes or not, you are going to pay taxes. If you live in a society, you're paying a tax, whatever that may be. It may not be financial, because you may live in a society where money is not an actual thing, right? If you're in a hunter-gatherer society, there's not a financial tax, but there are social taxes. Like, you are going to be responsible for bringing food to the elderly people. You're going to be responsible for bringing food back to women who may be taking care of a newborn child. Like, there are social taxes that will exist. There are financial taxes that will exist. They all exist. But I do think that if we actually had scientists who have, and it is an anthropological problem, right? It is an anthropological problem because it is a human problem. If we actually had scientists who understand the very predictable responses of humans when they are put in very predictable situations, involved in policymaking in a way that was more powerful than money is involved in policymaking, we could have a better society in 5 years. We could have a better society tomorrow, but we could have a remarkably better society for every single human in 5 years.
Man, it gives me the willies, Patrick. I love this. So like, I probably brought this example up before, but like a real simple example is like, well, Seattle wanted to, there's so many good people in Seattle, so many people who think that they're good people. And so they said, hey, we're going to make a minimum wage for all the disabled employees. If you have Down syndrome and you have a job, you have autism, you have a job, we're going to make it so your minimum wage is $15 an hour. So all those companies that hired those people could no longer afford to hire them because they're not actually bringing as much value typically as a conventional worker. So they had to fire them all. So this is an example of trying to incent, like, you're trying to force companies to do something that you think is good, and it has the opposite system. And I don't think a lot of people are, to make a system that would actually do the things that we really want to do. And even if we could, would they be the right things? I mean, I think about like even the push to EV, like all these electric cars and stuff. It's like, well, okay, what are we going to do with battery disposal? And what are we going to do? Like, we got to mine all this lithium. Like, it's not that you plug your car in and well, there's holes in the wall and I put the plug in and then I get power for free and it came from nowhere and there's no emissions. I mean, it's so darn complex. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, I just feel more and more like I can't do anything except something that is very immediate to my surroundings and my life, because anything larger scale in that, it could just be a disaster in a way. It's like it gets back to like the biblical thing of like, or all the old stories, like, Icarus, flying too close to the sun, like this ascent that we have, this drive to ascension. And clearly we are ascending, and who knows where this is going to lead, all of our technological development. But I don't know. It sounds like you have better plans than I do. You have a better way to figure this out than I do. And
I don't think that's true.
One more thing though, to get back to something that I think you've been touching at a lot, is that America right now seems to have a crisis where we don't think that we're a good country. We're being told constantly that we're a corrupt country. And yet there are plenty of people who still want to get in here all the time because it's a hell of a lot better than wherever they're fleeing from. And then you look at somewhere like China, and they're all being told that their country is amazing and they have a bright future and they should love their country and help their country out. And they're great pieces comparing TikTok, the TikTok app in America versus China, and how China, they control what comes through TikTok, like completely. And what comes through there is very pro-China. It's about holding your society together, building it up, and working for the greater good. And then they're like, TikTok in the Western countries, yeah, you guys can just do whatever you want. And so here, it is just like, it's just what it is. It's just out of control. It's totally out of control. And so I think we're raising a new generation. I think Gen X doesn't really think that much of Western culture or Western values. And we're raising our children in the same way to think, well, we came from corrupt roots, and this is maybe it's an irredeemable country that we can't even fix. And so we don't have a good story at this point. It seems like we've lost our faith in a way, and that can be a catastrophe, I suppose. People worry about like this battle between the superpowers, and we have like the aging superpower of the United States, and then we have the obvious rising power of China, and people are worried about some kind of like conflict there, when in reality China doesn't have to do anything. They just have to wait. Like, you can see what's happening here, and they just have to wait and let it play out.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with India. I mean, there are definitely going to be new superpowers in the next century. I mean, that is undeniable. I think it's fascinating. I mean, so dial all the way back to where you started, which is in Seattle. Okay, they asked businesses to pay more for people. I would say, again, that's very predictable, right? There was no incentive for the business to pay more. The incentive was not for the business. And until we create policies that incentivize doing the right thing, making law that says do the right thing is not going to work. It has to be an incentive to do the right thing. And I think if you looked at that policy, it wouldn't take that much tweaking to make that an incentive. That seems like a problem that could have been easily predicted and easily solved to me. But if we take this idea of like rising and falling, one of the challenges that we have is there are an awful lot of people who want to make America what it was, right? That want to pull America back into the past because they think that this past thing is where we're headed, or where they want to be headed, to regress. So if we have a country of people who are actively calling to regress as society, the likelihood that we are going to progress at the same level as the rest of the world is infinitely small. I mean, if at half the population is working to actively regress, the likelihood that we progress is essentially zero. We cancel each other out. So I think that I do think that, yeah, America is better than a lot of other places, but if we're looking at the data, the slide is backwards. The slide is in the wrong direction, and I think that's what Generation X is noticing. Is, hey, in 1998, before the dot-com bubble burst, I was leaving high school, and like, the world looked like it was going to be amazing. The economy was exploding. All of these job opportunities, like the people that graduated 3 years ahead of me were taking these like $100,000 plus jobs before they even graduated college. They were just leaving college to this world of opportunity. And then 3 years later, we're like getting ready to leave college and there is no economy. And you're looking around and you're like, well, dogfood.com bust. That's bad, I guess. So we grew up in this space where there was this promise that was shown to us and then it just collapsed, right? And that doesn't mean that everyone in Generation X struggled, but it does impact, I think, the way that we perceive what is potentially possible for a lot of us, right? For a lot of us. Mm-hmm. For me, yeah. I view what is possible is very different than what was possible in my parents' generation, for sure.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, but you went from one income being enough to, women's liberation, go work for a corporation and raise a family. Aren't you liberated now? Yeah. And then now to, well, yeah, you need two incomes. And then where's your side hustle? You need your side hustle too.
Just 4 incomes.
And glorify the side hustle. And people don't see that for what it is, which is that there was the divergence started in 1971, where corporate profits and labor's compensation diverged. They used to track pretty well together, but then there was a large divergence that it started there in 71 and has continued to just grow
exponentially, expand.
Yeah. And so you're gonna have to be a contrarian to, I mean, we've been talking about these like big ideas on how you change society. Well, good luck, right? And guess what? Yeah. Your AOC's dress isn't going to change a damn thing in your life. Like, if you're not paying attention and trying to figure out how you're going to position yourself best, and whether that's buying some ridiculous meme shit coins or trying to trying to grow your own food, or, buy some precious metals or something. I don't know. Good luck figuring it out. Who the heck knows? But the system is not really, it's rigged against you in a way, that's for sure. And you can see the acceleration of the wealth transfer. You look at like all the COVID loans, the business loans that happened, and then the both in the US and in Western European countries. And then you look at the demand for yachts and supercars that happened after that.
Yeah.
It was just out of control. And so the money goes to the people closest to where the money is created. So it's, it's coming out of the government, the banks, whatever, the people closest to that money, they're the ones who have access to it first. And then everyone else gets some scraps. And so, yeah, get a side hustle to your other side hustle. And good luck. Get a couple side hustles and good luck navigating this.
So to like circle back to, and I have taken us so far off the rails. It's hard.
We haven't talked about community at all, Patrick.
We did. We talked. I gave you one cul-de-sac example. Example.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back to that because it goes to your point, which is your sphere of influence, right? And you're saying, hey, the sphere of influence is relatively small, and the reality is the 100% reality is the sphere of influence is one, right? Like you have the ability to change one person the way you want one person to be, and that person is you, and you cannot change anyone else to be the person that you want to be other than you. So the sphere of influence, like, purely is one. And we are having the worst internet day of all time today, I feel like. So we'll just continue to struggle on with our poor internet day. It's just how it is today.
Yeah. Totally.
So you have the one person sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
But can you branch that out into a larger encompassing bubble, right? Like, and that is the creation of community. How can you offer olive branches out into a community? My one idea is we buy up one house for every 10 to 30 people, or every 10 to 30 families, and we use that as a cooking space, and that becomes a collective space where we all get together to consume meals, because it makes life better, I believe.
So then what you're doing, the United States already has a housing deficit. So you're saying that the people who can already afford to have an asset such as a house and who are qualified to get a loan, they're going to gobble up another, roughly 10% of the housing units out there.
You can do this in the rental market as well. Easier.
Driving up. Yeah, yes, exactly. So then you're pulling the ladder up away from people who can't even afford to rent. Then it's going to go down, trickle down to trailer parks. And then pretty soon the price of tents will go up because people are buying a tent. I'm just kidding. But
no,
you can see how like the unintended consequences of plans like that, right? You're like gobbling up additional resources to
incentivize the builders, right? So
yeah,
this is a problem. All of these problems are so easily solved, right? Building one extra unit per 30 units in an apartment, or building out the business model in which one unit per 30 units in an apartment is not an insurmountable task. Right, like it's a remarkably easy task for us. These are manageable problems, I think, is my point. I understand what you're saying, though, right? Is we do have a problem where it feels like there is a finite amount of living spaces. The reality is, if we look at Europe, right, like the density of human population in Europe is exponentially more than the density of human population in America. In America, we have this like spoiled perspective that we should have all of this space. And I am the most guilty of us all in that world. I am like, I require all of this space around me and I have to be by myself at all times and blah, blah, blah. I get it. I'm a hypocrite. But the reality is, within the space that I live, there could easily be 60 families. There could easily be 120 families on and everybody has a half-acre lot. They could grow their own food in the space that I live. One person. So like we don't have the problem that we think we have in the way we think we have it. We have the problem because that's the society we've decided to build.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we sort of decided, it's sort of emerged, right? Like Europe was all built before the automobile, right? And we had the automobile, and that really shaped so much of how we built out the cities here and the suburbs and all of that stuff. But let's say you lived in a cul-de-sac and you had the 11th house. Would you want to do that? I don't think I'd want to do it. See, I wouldn't want to see all these. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to see these people.
I absolutely would. Absolutely.
Leave me the hell alone.
That is the selfishness that's within us, and that's why it doesn't work.
But because it hasn't emerged naturally, or it only emerges very rarely as some kind of communal thing, that means we don't actually want it in a way, right? And so it's like there is still enough freedom, I think, in the individual to point us to what we do want and what we don't want in a way. But
so I will say this, like I lived in a suburban community before I lived here, right? As suburban as it was. And I know for a fact, my neighbors wanted to be friends with me. And I know for a fact, I wanted to be friends with my neighbors, but we weren't. Not because it's what we wanted, but because it's what feels normal. It's like, oh, well, we have these big concrete walls between us. Those concrete walls exist for a reason, to keep you out. But I know that like I had one neighbor who like shared property with me. And when he moved, like he came over and we had this like heart-to-heart conversation about like how much we appreciated sharing this fence and like being kind and respectful to another. And like we could have had that a month into this experience and been so much closer and so more bonded, but we didn't have it until he moved away. And that isn't uncommon. Like when I talk to my friends, almost no one knows their neighbor. I mean, they know their neighbor, right? But it's not like they're getting together for barbecues. And growing up in the 80s, I can tell you, we got together for barbecues. It was better. It was better. Like I knew all my neighbors. My parents knew all our neighbors. And that's just not how it happened for me. And I know we're still struggling with internet. That's just, This is a cursed podcast. This is as cursed a podcast as we've ever had.
It's been quite cursed. Yeah. What happened? Maybe I don't think my VPN is on. That always is a problem. So I don't think mine's
for
on.
sure.
Maybe.
That definitely mine is not. But
okay.
But
Let's see.
it could be that Elon is mad, right? We haven't even brought up Elon, but it could be that he's mad because he does control my internet. So
yeah,
he could be mad. All right. So with the realization, we've been going on for a long time. With the realization, we only briefly touched on community, but we also have cursed internet. Anything on a final touch from you?
It's all, this is going to be coming out. We're going to be approaching 2022. One thing that we didn't touch on, and maybe we will at some point, and we probably need to talk more about what we had talked about on that last episode, where we'd arrived there with, caring for aging parents and all that. But what, it's good to think about, if you're going to create something or you're going to live somewhere, do whatever. I think beauty is such an undervalued thing at this point. Like, everything is about the utility and the features and how fast can it go or how efficient is it. And my God, we used to have this muse of beauty, and we've lost that in a lot of ways, I think, as a culture. I mean, especially in America, you look at the strip malls that a lot of cities and suburbs are just populated with, and there is still a lot of beauty everywhere, and that's a wonderful thing, but we could make more and we could do a better job. And so I think that's an important thing to think about as well, because there are going to be good times and there are going to be bad times. And if you're going through bad times, you may as well be surrounded by something beautiful. Right? Beautiful buildings, beautiful art, whatever. There's something to be said for that.
It makes me, I think you're right. It makes me think about Van Gogh. So Van Gogh was like slated to go to this very concrete block, institutionalized mental institution. And at the very last moment, his family had a change of heart, and they sent him to this aesthetically pleasing mental institution. He was institutionalized, but he was sent to this place where he did a remarkable amount of the early paintings that Van Gogh for, like the iris painting, which is really like the start, the shift of him into true impressionism. Where the iris series was done, and most of his field series, which is again some of the most famous Van Gogh works that are held here in America, were all done from this mental institution. And it is remarkably likely, if his family did not have that change of heart, that Van Gogh would not exist, right? If he was sent to a concrete block, the likelihood that he changes the way he expresses his art into this thing that we now there's traveling exhibits of this dude that aren't even showing his art. They're just showing digital representations of his art. So it is remarkably likely that one of the most influential artists of our life would not have existed if the external setting of his existence hadn't shifted to how it did.
Yeah. I saw one of those exhibits, one of the digital ones in Las Vegas.
How was it?
That was great. It was fun. I think they probably took in more there than if they were walking through a museum. Maybe not. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting thing to do. And yeah, it's all housed inside of a giant rectangular air-conditioned warehouse, right? So it's like this, it's this amazing, you know, yin and yang of just like the utilitarianness of this warehouse. And then you have, and then, you know, there's something about it that was annoying though too, because you're projecting it onto walls, all these images, and then you've got like, well, on this wall there's a door, and then there's like an emergency exit sign there, and that's always glowing. And so like, God, we're doing our best here, but we're just, you know, it's America. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. So yeah, so people are gonna be listening to this, you know, holidays coming up. I guess do what you can to, you know, make some beauty, touch some people, realize that some people are really struggling in these times. And if you can tip them handsomely, do that, or beautifully, whatever, do that, and make some connection with people, because times are really good for a lot of people and really terrible for other people. So do what you can to make genuine contacts with people, even if it's just for a small interaction, and expand your humanness a little bit.
Expand your humanness. I like that idea, especially kind of thinking about the fact that, hey, holidays are fastly approaching. You're likely going to be around family members. Kind of a wonderful opportunity to see what you can do to bridge and build connection and community within the nucleus, right? That's what we were supposed to start from today, but we made it back to the same spot. Is like building community starts from the nucleus of the family and works out. This holiday, maybe we start to build that foundation, solidify that foundation in a way that it is unshakable. Yeah. Happy end of 2021. And thanks for being you.
Hey, everyone, make sure to check out this episode on YouTube, because Patrick is rocking some kind of crazy, like fuzzy Obi-Wan Kenobi look. It's an incredible like mix up between like an Obi-Wan Kenobi look and like a stuffed animal.
It's very stuffed animal-y for sure.
Yeah. So check out the YouTube just for that.
Appreciate that, Joel. That's a good call out.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks, Patrick. I really enjoy the back and forth and thinking about these things, even though it was a cursed transmission here.
It was.